This is the ultimate video series for the Auburn football fan. 31 Auburn football legends in one room for one full day, telling the stories that made the Auburn Tigers one of the best college football programs in the nation. Names that reflect history. Nick Ardillo, Tom Bryan, Jeff Berger, Jackie Burkett, Randy Campbell, Kurt Crane, Joe Cribbs, Al Del Greco, Vince Dooley, Mark Dorminey, Pat Dye, Liston Edens, Paul Ellen, Thomas Gossam, Lee Gross, Harold Hallman, Terry Henley, Kenny Howard, Mike Colon, David Langner, Ben Leard, Tommy Lorino, Buddy McClinton, Bill Newton, Patrick Nix, Ken Rice, Quentin Riggins, Rob Selby, Pat Sullivan, Ben Tamburello, Stan White. The legends of Auburn football telling their stories. The victories, the defeats, the locker room chatter, stories about the Auburn football legends told by the legends themselves. And it's all here for you, the Auburn Tiger fan. Now sit back and relax because it's time to begin.
It's an honor for me to be here with you in this room. Keep in mind, you're representing literally hundreds of your teammates that go back over 100 years. So tell those stories and honor your teammates as well as the teams you played on. Just to get things started, Nick, I kind of wanted to start with you because I know we're going to talk about big games and special, memorable events. But when we talk about coaches, kind of the man we read about, a lot of us, was Coach Marr, who had the vision to bring the facilities and the games to Auburn. And, of course, we hear about Marr's Marauders. And you're the only guy I've met that can tell us about Marr's Marauders. So tell us a little bit about Coach Marr.
Well, thank you. Let me first say that I'm at awe being here with this distinguished group. It's something special in my mind. Coach Marr came to Auburn in 1934, stayed to 1942. And the Marr Marauders are a group of young people or old people that played for Coach Marr. And it's about 40 or 50 of us that started it back in 1983. Ken Lott, who was a player at Auburn, never played any, but he practiced every day. And then there was Dr. Well, I don't think of his name, but anyhow, the two of them in Mobile were the president, put together the North and South All-Star game in Mobile. And Ken thought, well, let me see if I can get a bunch of old Auburn guys come over and enjoy this game with us. And about 40 of us went there and had a luncheon. And at that time, everybody was enjoying themselves, much like we are here today. And it was decided that it might be well if we could meet maybe a couple of times a year. And we decided to do that. And we elected officers. Bummy Roten became president, and Billy Hitchcock became vice president, and Ken Lott was the secretary. And he did all of the communicating and the party arrangement and all of that. Did a great job with it. And we decided that we would go to Panama City. And then we stayed there a year, and the other thing would be that one of the members would house a team in their hometown, wherever it was. We hosted in Birmingham at the Embassy Suite there, and then went to the club for dinner. And other one later went to Montgomery. We went to Savannah. We went to Monroeville. And we went to different places and just had a great time. And the program was that the men, if there was a place to go fishing, they went fishing. If it was a place to play golf, we played golf. And that's about the extent, other than sitting around and shooting a bull like a group of people would do. And that is the beginning of the Marr Marauders. Then it was decided that, you know, it'd be nice to have the ladies with us. You know? So we included the ladies. And they enjoyed it. And, of course, they played bridge and visited and went on and shopped and things like that. And it went from 1983 until this past year. Pat Dye is an honorary member of it. And I think that's the only one that's here. And this year, we were down to about 10 Marauders. But we had the wives, they were still there, maybe 20 of us. And it came to where I'm 86 years old. It came that we were all this old or older, and we couldn't travel anymore. And so we decided to give up the organization and notify everybody that we had a little money left, and one of our members passed away. We usually send an honorarium to wherever the obituary suggests that we send a memorial. And so Billy Hitchcock and Jim McGowan and I have a little, we sign off on the checks, and we'll use it until that money's gone to give a memorial. And that's just about what the Marauders did. And it was a great run. And but you know, like everything, when you just get too old, you get too old. And it was trouble for some of them to travel. So that's about the Marauders. And at a little later date, I've talked long enough. A little later date, I'll talk about Coach Moore.
Okay. Talking about the coaches and Kenny Howard, you were kind of around, I guess, right after Coach Moore and came along. And, you know, he built the first stadium, but really you were around when Coach Hutzel and the others that followed him kind of had the dream to bring Auburn into competitive balance facilities-wise. Talk a little bit about what was going on from maybe the 40s through up when Coach Jordan came along.
Well, my first experience there was in 45, and then we had a real big stadium. I think we could seat 7,500 there at that time, and it was just on one side, the west side. On the east side, we had some concrete blocks with 2x10s put on the blocks where people could sit there. And then the main source of the stadium then was the track because of Coach Hutzel, and we had outstanding track teams, and of course it was a cinder track. The stadium went outside the track. And then as the stadium started expanding, when we started to get people to come see us, when we started winning, then we had to make a tunnel for the track to go through. And there are several people around here that participated in that track that go around. It's always thrilling to see who went in the tunnel and who come out, and who come out first. But that was the beginning of the stadium with that very small number of people that they had. They had a press box that was about as wide as this podium that we're sitting on here now, room for a table, room for a chair, maybe room to walk behind it. And we could probably get 25 or 30 people into that press box. Of course, if they used 16 millimeter film to film the thing. Well, they had to climb a ladder to get on top of the press box to film the games then. And I think that the camera that was used in that time is now in the museum there in the athletic building at the athletic building in Auburn now. Quite a museum. And I'm just happy that I'm not stuffed in the museum. But I'm, but Pat, I didn't mean anything when I said that.
I'm happy to be here, Ken.
I understand that completely. But it is an outstanding thing there. But so far as the football, which is the heart and soul of any athletic department, I don't care what anybody says, and it's because of the people that are involved with it, coaches, athletes. We have everybody here, I think, played football except me. I couldn't chew gum and walk at the same time. And just right quick, how many of you would do it over? I don't see a single hand that says they would not. And I have asked this to a lot of people over the period of time, at the Senior Bowl, at the Blue-Gray games, other thing, would you do it again? And it's always a positive answer, say that they would. So there has to be something good about a game that everyone would play again, even though they got banged up and beat up. Here's the dislocated shoulder, here's the dislocated shoulder. You never got hurt, did you?
He hurt a lot of other people.
But they are a lot of people that have been banged up. Some never could continue playing, but they said that they would do it again.
You were there for two pretty milestone events, the renewal of the Alabama series when that negotiation was going on and when Coach Jordan was hired. Can you tell us about those two things?
Well, when Coach Jordan was hired, he was hired by Jeff Beard. Really, he was demanded that Coach take the job. He called him up and he says, the job's open, apply for it. Coach Jordan wrote a little note, I hereby apply for the head football coaching job, and sent it to Coach Beard. Coach Beard took it to Dr. Drone, who was the president, and he says, here's the man for the job. And okay, that's it. And he was awfully expensive. I think he started out at $14,000 for his first salary, and then he went on from was hired there for that. Then the governor demanded that Auburn and Alabama play football. The negotiations to get ready to play that game was done in alleyways up by the Tutwiler Hotel between the presidents of the universities. And it was decided that they would play and when they would play at the end of the season. The first game was a premium game. They charged $10 a ticket for that first ball game. And they talk about security nowadays. You should have seen at that ball game. Lord, they had ladders going over the fences in Legion Field. I have never seen so many people at a place in my life. And of course, Auburn got stomped, 55 to nothing. So next year, we went back up there to play and had a young man named Travis Tidwell, the Auburn quarterback. And we went into the stadium to warm up and walked out onto the field, and all you could hear from the Alabama fans was 56, 56, 56. This was a chant. Well, it wound up 14-13 with Eddie Salem missing an extra point late in the ball game. It sailed off to the right. I can still see it. And I still have a little football that the alumni gave us with the score on it. But that was the beginning of the Auburn-Alabama series, which is one of the greatest series in football. And of course, you know, that's the thing that's so great about football. You have these great challenges and great rivalries between Auburn and Alabama. Of course, it's kind of new. The big rival when it first started was Georgia Tech. Man alive, you could beat Georgia Tech, it was something. And that was the big rival. Then it would be Georgia. Florida came in later, and then Alabama after that. So these tremendous rivalries is what's so good. And the thing that is so good about it is these guys that played there would get together after the season with the guys that played at Alabama, and they're friends. Well, they played with each other and against each other in high school. So there is a camaraderie, not only between the teams that you play on, but with the teams that you compete against.
Coach Dooley, you were there when Coach Jordan came in. What was the change like then?
I think one of the great things about this is that as you listen to people, it'll stimulate thoughts and memories in your mind. And as the day goes on, I think that'll be true of every one of you here. None of you will have any stimulation of the memories that's just been mentioned because none of you were living at that time. But I was, and I've already been stimulated because going back to Ken Lott in Mobile that you mentioned, he was a the one that helped recruit me, along with a fellow named Dr. Phil Gilchrist out of Mobile.
That's the name I was trying to
That's
think
what
of.
I thought you were trying to remember. And they were great Auburn people that really was influential in my coming. And as a player, I had the privilege of meeting Coach Marr. We were down in Miami playing Miami my senior year, and Coach Marr lived down there. Coach Jordan had him come out and talk to the team.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and his son Pat also played,
Yeah.
who went to high school at Auburn High School, also played at Auburn. But that game that Kenny was talking about in '49 against Alabama, which was the 14-13 game, I was a high school recruit at that time and came to that ball game. And it was so memorable because Travis Tidwell, who we just lost here recently, was one of my heroes as I was growing up. And just what a performance he had in that ball game. And it was so stimulating to me that probably that game maybe was the thing that put me over the hump. That's where I wanted to go to school, because I saw this great spirit among the people. And of course, they were spirited. In fact, they used to say that the year before, when it was 58-0, that when you'd make a first down at Auburn, everybody would be like it was the greatest thing that ever happened. You know? But when you win a ball game like that, then that certainly motivated and excited me to where I wanted to come to Auburn. And I did come to Auburn, and from there I can go on and on about Coach Jordan, because my first year, they convinced us we were going to have a rebuilding year. And so that sounded good to me, but I didn't know it was going to be rebuilding from the bottom, because we lost every football game. It's hard to believe that Auburn would lose every football game, but in 1950 that happened. I mean, did not win a game. I felt like our freshman team could beat their varsity. I was so mad, I guess, disappointed and fired up, because the worst football game I think I ever saw in my life is when Auburn got beat by Southeast Louisiana 6-0 when I was a freshman, and I felt like our team could beat both of those teams combined. But anyway, then Coach Jordan came, and that was the beginning, I guess, of what we referred to as the Underground Railroad, because when he came, he brought a bunch of Georgia coaches with him, and most of those coaches were my coaches. And I say the beginning because later I went to Georgia and brought a lot of Auburn coaches with me. Then Pat comes to Auburn, brings a lot of Georgia coaches with him. So there is what's been known as this Underground Railroad between the two schools, and it's a great intense rivalry, as you all know. And we fight hard when we compete hard, but yet there is I think a special camaraderie among the players. You've gotten to know each other a lot in these golf tournaments. Some have been named honorary Bulldogs. A few of them have been named honorary Tigers. And so that's all part of the great fun of competing. And I've had that great privilege from both sides. But I'm going to stop now, because I'll come back and talk about Coach Jordan, because I think he deserves total concentration. And I don't want to spend too much time other than to give those that are here a little bit of the background of my involvement as a youngster coming to Auburn.
Paul, one little addendum to it has to do with that, but at the 49 game, we'll forget about 49, is Legion Field sold cushions. At the time, you could rent them for 50 cents a piece. And they were pillows that you sit on, and those old seats up there that were feather filled. And after that game, Legion Field went out of business of pillows, because Auburn folks, they didn't leave the stadium. They'd split that and throw that on the field. I know all the players were dressed and come back out on the field and watch those pillows flying up in the air. No one had left the stadium except the Alabama people. And you sit there, and I have never seen so many feathers on the field, in the stands, everywhere. and it put them out of business as far as selling cushions.
Coach, you were part of that underground railroad, so to speak, although you took a circuitous route around to it. Talk about, though, your playing days, playing for Georgia, when you played against Ken Rice and some of these guys for Auburn.
My first memories of Auburn is in Columbus, Georgia. Coming to watch my older brothers play against Auburn. Of course, I never saw Georgia beat Auburn. I mean, that was when Coach Dooley was playing, and Bobby Freeman and Bob James and Jim Pyburn and Childress, and you know that. I mean, they were a great football team, and that would have been in, I guess, 55, 56, and 57, and Georgia came real close to beating Auburn in 57, the year they won the national championship in Columbus. One of the things I remember about the game in Columbus, it always ended up in a fight. I mean, it was just, you know, it was just one of them old family fights. You know, they get out there sometime during the course of the game. They just get after it, and you know, I'm sure they probably all got together that night and laughed about it or whatever. But the game was played in Columbus, and then. Because I played in the last game in Columbus in 1958, which we lost 21-6 to Auburn, and then the next year in '59, we played in Athens and won, and then in 1960 we came back to Auburn and played and lost, and I still think it's one of the classic football games that I've ever played and been a part of. Ed Dice kicked 3 field goals, and Darrell Pennington kicked 2, and Auburn beat us 9-6. Didn't score a touchdown. But Coach Jordan and our family kind of go back a long ways. When I was being recruited in high school, and his Miss Jordan was from Rosia, Georgia, about 10 or 12 miles from where I was raised. And Coach Jordan and Miss Jordan would come to Rosia to visit her mother, and Coach Jordan and my daddy would get together and ride them old country roads in a pickup truck, and probably had a little libation go along with them. And you know, I got to know him, and of course he was a true Southern gentleman, and every respect, and. You know, but I got to know him, but for long before I thought about going to anywhere to college, really. And I guess at that time he would have been building the program at Auburn, and but it started early, and then of course when all of my experience against Auburn was fighting them. As a player competing against them, and then of course coaching in Alabama for 9 years and competing against Auburn. And when I got to Auburn in 1981, what I remembered is really, excuse the expression, but what I remember is getting my ass beat out there on the football field, and then every time you lined up and played against them, I mean it was a war for 60 minutes. For 3 years, I played in front of G.W. Clapp, and he wasn't no great football player, but he was a great fighter. I mean, you know what you got on the first play, you got on the last play. I mean, he was bringing it for 60 minutes, and just and any of you know G.W. and any of you might have played with him, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But of course. You know, some of the folks are here that we played against, but it was a great challenge to be on that other side. And then, of course, like I said, when I came to Auburn, I just knew that they had been good when I was playing against them, and if they had been good, that good. And then, of course, they were good when I was coaching in Alabama and they beat us, and that Auburn could be good again. And I didn't know exactly how we were going to get there, but I knew that that it was there, and we just started out and went to work, and the rest of it's history.
You know, Coach, when you first came to Auburn in '81, I'll never forget you were down in Montgomery speaking to the alumni group. About 1,000 people there that night, and there's that famous quote. Somebody asked you, said, "Well, Coach Dye, how long do you think it's going to take to beat Alabama?" And you didn't miss a beat. And you said 60 minutes. And I can remember that like yesterday. Came straight from the heart and mind real quick, and just everybody.
Listen, about that, at that particular time, I was doing the radio, and I was close to Coach Dye, and you remember I'd always come down on the field, and we'd talk before the game. And that first Alabama game, I came down, and Coach Dye had been out on the field with players warming up. He had talked to Coach Bryant, and he called me back on the stand. He said, "Boy, I just messed up." I said, "What?" He said, "I just told Coach Bryant, you better buckle up because we fixed to get after your ass." and then I said, "Coach," I said, "What did he say?" He looked down at me. He said, "You little so-and-so." He said, "I ain't scared of you."
You know, when you go into a new program, a new situation, and you know, Auburn had that great tradition that a lot of players in here helped create and were a big part of. But they hadn't won in several years, and had won some big games, but hadn't won a championship. And you really have to learn how to win those big games and to win them, and you have to learn how to finish. And it took us a year and to the Georgia game the next year for us to learn how to finish. Now we played good, and we had that our first year. We should have beat Mississippi State, but we didn't finish, and we should have beat Tennessee, but we didn't finish, and we went ahead of Alabama up there in a game that Coach Bryant set the record on, but we didn't know how to finish. And then the Georgia game, when they came in '82, we had done everything we could do to prepare to play, and we had just come off of a really tough football game against Florida, and I think it was before we played. I think it was after we played Florida, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. But anyway, they come into Auburn. I believe you were ranked #1 in the nation, Coach, and of course had Herschel.
Mm. Yeah, that's it.
And
had a heck of a game.
And we lined up there, and they had a better football team. They had better players than we did, and they had a better football team than we did. But our kids stood in there and fought them, and we finished. We didn't win, but we finished. We played the full 60 minutes. Lionel broke a long run about 87 yards in the fourth quarter and put us ahead 17-14. And with the great tradition in the football team that they got at Georgia, they just proceeded to line up and hand it to Herschel and bring it right back down the field. And I forget who was the quarterback. I don't know, his last name? Was Ballou. One of the quarterbacks, I forget which one it was, completed a key third down pass that kept the drive alive, and we got a 15-yard penalty that helped them. But anyway, they take it back down the field and score and go ahead 21-17. And then they kick off to us, and the game is coming to an end. And the year before, we'd have been looking for a way to, just finish out. But Randy was a quarterback, and I don't know who else was in here was playing on that team, but took it right back down the field to the 14-yard line, and we just run out of downs. But had a chance to beat a great Georgia football team. And in my opinion, that's when we became, a football team that could win a championship, was that day. And went in the dressing room after the game, and one of the most memorable times in my years as a coach here in the dressing room, I didn't know what to say. I always tried to have what I was going to say, win or lose, prepared before you get in there, so you don't it's a lot better to think about what you're going to say, win or lose, before you get in there, and then you won't make quite as many mistakes. So I get in the dressing room, but I can't. I look around the dressing room, and there's Dormany and Randy and all those guys in there, and they ever got their head on the line and played, the full time, and we didn't win. And they come up with the right words at a time like that is, if you're the coach, it's important. And I was sitting there trying to think of what they're saying. It was quiet, and some of them kids was sniffling around, and I was about to myself, and the dressing room was vibrating. I said, "What the hell is that?" And I stopped it, and everything got quiet, and it was fans. They were still in the stands, chanting, had a soul left the stadium. They were chanting, "It's great to be an Auburn Tiger. It's great." And I listened, and I listened, and I looked around and I said, "Listen." I said, "You hear that?" I said, "That's what this football team is all about." And I said, "The reason you hear that is because you played the full 60 minutes. And I said, we didn't win today, but you gave everything in your body to win. I said, we'll have the same opportunity in 2 weeks, and we'll win." And of course, it turned out exactly that way. We had the same opportunity in 2 weeks against Alabama and come from behind and won. Where the year before, we went ahead against Alabama, and they came back and we folded. That was the transition to me that made our football team. And then, of course, the next year, we had a good football team, but we had the ability to
60
finish.
minutes in 3 years?
No, we played a lot of 60-minute games. I mean, it was different when the 60 minutes against Alabama up in Birmingham was the difference, but we just become a football team that was confident.
It was your third game, wasn't it?
Second.
No, it was my second season. It was about the 10th ball game against Georgia.
Coach, I was a graduate assistant when you came that first year with you, and they should have put you in jail that first spring. You made the Junction boys look like a peewee team.
Now Coach Jordan, I'm sure, did the same thing when he came to Auburn, and Coach Dooley did the same thing when he went to Georgia.
I know you remember that spring.
But you got to find out who the game means something to, and it's really unfair to the players. But there's no other way to go about doing it. And so, you got to get down to who's going to play and who's not going to play.
You act like you enjoyed it, though, Coach.
I don't know. I remember being there. I was there that spring, and I was Coach Dyer's first class at Auburn.
You wasn't there in the spring of '81.
Spring of '81? No, that's when I came.
I was there.
Spring. No, I didn't go to spring.
I can vouch for that. We came out on the field, and you saw cones set up in groups all the way down the field. And Coach broke us off, and we went 3-on-3 in every one of those groups. Kickers, punters, quarterbacks, it didn't matter who you were. You lined up in 3-on-3, and we did that to start the practice every day for probably 2 weeks. Just like he said, trying to find out who really wanted to play. And,
the players that want to play, they don't necessarily like it, but they'll do it. But the ones that don't want to play, they'll get their ass out of there. And that's really what you want is to find out, where it's at, and you got to.
Coach, how many did you run off?
I didn't run nobody off. Listen, ain't no coach ever run a player off. The players left because they found an easier way to, something easier to do. But now you made it difficult on some of them.
you talk this, and all of us, it's great to be an Auburn Tiger. Yeah. Every one of us in this room came to Auburn to be an Auburn Tiger.
Yeah.
Every one of us. I mean, something of that spirit you mentioned, that tradition that you mentioned, all of us, you know, lived that. I mean, myself growing up as a kid, wanting to be an Auburn Tiger, you know, wanting to be an Auburn. Although this man almost talked me into coming to Georgia, you know, I still ended up being an Auburn Tiger. And the pride that I felt when I put on that blue jersey, that first time in that dressing room, the pride as a freshman football player that I was going to, from Oxford, Alabama, that I was going to get to come out of that tunnel and they're going to say, here comes the Tigers, is a feeling that we've all experienced, and we wouldn't trade that for anything in this world to be an Auburn Tiger. It was a pride that you just can't explain, that nobody outside really of this room can explain what it is to pull that jersey over your head and put it on and be in that dressing room ready to prepare for the battle.
You know, Terry, everybody in here has got their own story, and their relationship with that institution. And, you know, I became an Auburn man by luck or default or whatever you want to say, because Auburn was trying to hire Coach Dooley, and he stayed at Georgia, and they had already had a coaching vacancy. Well, they tried to hire 2 or 3 other coaches, and I just was there, and they couldn't, whatever, you know, and
Hey, I recommended you. Don't forget that. That's the first I've heard of that.
I appreciate it.
I did.
But anyway, they, you know, and I had no idea. I didn't have any, you know, I knew that there was something different about Auburn, but I didn't have any idea what it was. And I don't mind telling you, I went to Georgia and I coached at Alabama, and Georgia has kind of got an Auburn split personality, and Alabama's got their own personality, you know, which we don't like at all. But Auburn was, you know, if I could have picked people and a place and situations and circumstances that I wanted to live the rest of my life around, I mean, it was perfect. And I didn't even know it when I was trying to get the job. I just know they could kick folks' ass on the football field, and I just seen it happen, and I played against them. But the first meeting that I had with the team, now Mark was there, Randy, you was there, Al, you was there. And I walk in there, and not a damn one of them knew who the hell I was. They didn't have no idea. I mean, I wasn't no household word. I wasn't some famous guy. And when I walked in that room with the players, and Dr. Funderburk introduced me, you know, I looked around the room in the frustration, because they'd gone through 6 weeks or a month since football season without a coach and all of the rumors and stuff going on. But the frustration and the anxiety, I mean, you could see it in the eyes and tell just, and I told him, I said, look, I said, you know, I don't know why you came to Auburn. All of you probably might have come for a different reason. Some of you came for the right reasons, some of you might have come for the wrong reasons. But regardless of why you came, you're here. This is your school, and this is your home, and this is where you're going to build your foundation and live the rest of your life on. I said, and Auburn chose me as a football coach. I said, now loyalty is real important in building a football team. I said, I don't expect you to be loyal to me, because you don't know me, and I don't know you. I said, what I'm going to expect is you to be loyal to Auburn University. You be loyal to Auburn and love it, and I'm going to be loyal to Auburn and love it, and we'll find us a common ground that we can build a football program that'll last a long time.
That's great.
And that's the way we started. And it wasn't easy. And there was a lot of heartaches and I mean, we could talk for days on stuff that happened. But every one of these guys around there got their own story and played a lot bigger part in the history of that school over there than I did, and I want to hear some of them.
You know, the thing about, Coach Jordan, though, and Pat and I have talked about this before, and I've heard Pat speak about it in some of his talks, that Coach Jordan was asked many times to go speak in New York or Boston or wherever, but he said, "No, I choose to stay with these Auburn people down here." You know, he wouldn't go there. You may want to comment some more on that, Pat.
Well, Coach Jordan, as you know, and Coach, you were talking about recruiting, and you know, you recruited me, and you were at Alabama, and you know, recruiting was so different then. You were talking about Ken Lott and Dr. Gilchrist, and you know, the Auburn person that recruited me was a guy named Virgil Spalding, and I always like to tell this story. And back then, alumni couldn't be involved, but it was before my senior year. It was in August, and there was an exhibition game in Birmingham. The Kansas City Chiefs and the Cowboys were playing, and Coach Lorendo, who was part of your Georgia Underground, was recruiting me for Auburn, and called and said Coach Jordan wanted to come take me to dinner and take me to the ball game. And Coach Griska, who was recruiting me for Alabama, called and said Coach Bryant wanted to come. And I committed to go with Coach Jordan, and he didn't go much. I mean, it was very seldom, Kenley, that he ever left Auburn. But he came up, and we went to the old Bankhead Hotel and had supper, and you know, we're driving out to Graymont, and it's a big crowd, you know, 60,000 at Legion Field, and about 4 blocks, August afternoon, August night, about 4 blocks from the stadium, Mr. Spalding's car radiator hose busted and it overheated. Well, he tells Coach Jordan and I, y'all get out and go into the game, and I'll get the car fixed and come join you. So Coach Jordan and I are walking down Graymont. About this time, we hear motorcycle escort and police cars coming, and they're escorting this car. And I'm walking down Graymont, and I look up to Coach Jordan, and I'm naive. And I said, Coach, I said, you know, I wonder who that is. I knew it wasn't the team. You know, it's close to kickoff. He looked down at me. He said, boy, he said, that's Coach Bryant. He said, you can either ride with him or walk with me. I won't ever forget that. And he was such a special man. And, you know, you could go on and, you know, tell all the different stories about Coach. But, you know, he's such a well-read historian. And,
loved Auburn.
You know, he loved, you know, Auburn and related to us in different ways. And
who was Coach Jordan's coach? Donahue?
Went to Kentucky. Can't think of his name right now.
Are you sure it wasn't Donahue?
No, I don't think it was Donahue. I think it was.
Well, he would have been playing at Auburn in the 30s.
Oh, Donahue would have been earlier than that.
Yeah.
Because Donahue left and went to LSU.
Well, now Donahue played for Rodney, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then he's in the Hall of Fame. Donahue is.
Okay, all right now. Well, what about Marr? Where was he?
He was in the 30s.
Well, where did he play?
Where did he play at Notre Dame?
Yeah.
See, what people don't realize is how much of our football tradition came from Newt Rockne. See, at Notre Dame. Coach Bryant, see, Frank Thomas played for Rockne and all of that stuff. All them coaches, Harry Meir, and all of those Georgia coaches over there had Rockne backgrounds, and all of that first football that we learned down here all came from Notre Dame.
Well, back then, Notre Dame was the place. And then it got to, and some were very successful, like Coach Thomas at Alabama. Yeah. There were many others that Coach Dye has already mentioned. But then it got to the point where the feeling was that only Notre Dame people knew football. So if you played at Notre Dame, you were an expert. And if
you ended up putting out some sorry coaches.
They put out a lot of sorry coaches. Because you got to go get a Notre Dame man. See, that was the idea. Well, they soon found out, and I think Coach Jordan said that, if you don't have faith in Auburn men, and that's kind of what he said when he was hired. You know, that's what you got to have faith in. And that's how part of why he got the job, because the person who was there before was a Notre Dame man that didn't win a football game, see, but he was a Notre Dame man. But Coach Jordan gave me the opportunity to come back to Auburn as an assistant coach. I played there, and it's interesting how you watch people and they become role models. You know, and you see how they react in situations. For instance, after a game in which you got your tail whipped and you're just mad and disgusted, but you'd walk out to that field and you'd be a gentleman and congratulate the other coach. And sometimes that's hard to do, but he did it with grace. And so you kind of observe those things. We all look at people that we admire a little bit, and you pattern yourself a little bit after it. So Coach Jordan, in many ways, was a great role model to me, helped me so much in a lot of things that I was able to do, and I patted myself after him. And then him giving me the opportunity to come back to Auburn when I finished the Marine Corps to be the first, along with George Atkins. George Atkins, we were freshmen together, so we both were the first Coach Jordan men to come back and coach, and I'm very, very proud of that. And from there, I got the opportunity to go to Georgia, and I do remember that as I heard Kenny talk about Coach Jordan's salary of $14,000, that was $2,000 more that I got when I went to Georgia 8 years later. But somebody said that's just about what you were worth. Well, but it was a start and an opportunity.
Coach, you and I had this conversation last night. My dad played in the 14-13 game. The quarterbacks back then didn't stand under the center. You snapped the ball back to them. I guess that's where the Notre Dame box or whatever came in.
Single wing box.
Single wing, yeah. It was a single wing.
Well, in '72, I thought we'd put in the old box, if you want to know the truth, because we didn't throw it. That Notre Dame thing came back in.
I tell you what, switching gears, the 58 Auburn team is the one that caused the demise of the single wing. We played Tennessee in Birmingham. Uniquest thing about that game, it was on TV, national TV. There was only one game a week. There were only 10 games a year that got on national TV. So
that was our only game on
That
TV.
was the only one we ever had. So that was a big deal and kind of a payback. We had played them 2 years before up there, and they just beat the dog out of it. Johnny Majors and all that crowd, and they beat us 35-7.
That was in 56.
That was in 56. And and then at that time, poor Auburn had to play all the games off campus. You know, we'd get Mississippi State and Northeast Louisiana and Chattanooga to come to Auburn, but we played Tech in Atlanta, and we had to play Tennessee in Birmingham or at their place. And we were playing Georgia and Columbus at that time, and Alabama, of course, always in Birmingham. But anyway, we get a chance to play these guys, and they're still running that single wing. And we had such a great defense anyway. So we threw what was equivalent to a Don Larson perfect game. And they ended up with no first downs, minus 34 yards rushing, minus 40-something yards total offense. And so it goes down to books, and it was written up that way as a no-hitter. And that was the end of that season was the last time anybody that we know of in major college football that ran the single wing. And two great defensive ends just kept, they just went out there and turned everything into Jackie and Zeke and those guys, and they made them run everything straight back up the middle. And we just shut them down. It was unbelievable. We played both ways in those days, and I know I didn't hit anybody all day. I mean, nobody ever got back that far. It just never happened. And
that was Wilson and Phillips.
Wilson Phillips and Mike Simmons and another Bobby Washington. And boy, those guys just had the game plan. And said you don't go in, you don't pitch, you just run parallel and turn it all in. And they did that all day, and it was unbelievable. It was.
Did Jim Phillips play with you then?
Yeah. Red. Red
graduated.
Red graduated in '57. That's right. So that would have been Wilson, Wasden, Simmons, and I can't remember who the fourth guy was. Might have been Sexton. Yeah. But these guys, he had.
Listen, when you play against all them guys, you know them just as good.
Oh, yeah. Of course, I was in the game. We had to fight with you guys in '56.
I wasn't out there then.
In Georgia.
I was watching from the stands.
Yeah.
But I had some brothers right in the middle of it.
Yeah. Well, I remember Gene Lorendo standing out in the middle of the field, literally. He's a pretty big guy. He was literally picking people up by the shoulder pad, both shoulders, and just throwing them away, just like this, standing out in the middle of the field. Of course, I was a little guy. I ran to the sideline.
He'd have been fighting too.
Yeah, that's right. But he got right in the middle of it.
Yeah. Oh, we were speaking of Coach Jordan, and a little bit, he was talking about his priorities and being a gentleman and so forth, and he did have his priorities with the game and everything. I think in proper perspective, it was a game still. And he had a sense of humor that a lot of people didn't really know was there. But to help him go through the fires and get to where he was in his perspective of the game and his take of it, he was on the invasion of North Africa. He was in the invasion of Sicily. He was in the invasion of Italy. He took him back to England, and he was in the invasion at Normandy, and he was shot on the beach there.
Coach Jordan?
Yes. He was shot, I think, 2 hours after the first landings at Normandy. Then, when the war ended there, they brought him back. He went through the United States. I think maybe he had a few days to visit with his family, and they sent him to the South Pacific, and he was in 2 invasions of islands in South Pacific. So he knows what it is to get shot at by stuff that would kill you. So he had a lot of seasoning, you might say, to be in the thick of things. And he was in the combat engineers. They were the folks that had to go and get ready for those folks to come in for battle and so forth. So he had been through a lot in the war. That's some of his background before he got to Auburn. Then after the war, he came back to Auburn. They said, well, everybody's got to have a job back. And he came back to Auburn, and after the war, and I traveled with him as a basketball coach. Did y'all know that he was a basketball coach at Auburn? But and then he went to Georgia as basketball coach.
Well, he was a baseball coach at Georgia too, wasn't he?
He was the line coach at Georgia, and he also coached basketball. He could have coached baseball. I don't know, but I do know he coached basketball, and he was a line coach when he came to Auburn.
Johnny Roush told me last night that he had coached him as a quarterback. He was a quarterback and center coach, make sure they got the exchange.
Kenny, you talking about those invasions and everything that Coach Jordan went through. I always thought Coach Jordan almost cherished that underdog role, the going into a situation, where there's long odds against you and everything. And I know he had to make a speech at least a dozen times while I was there about, he would start it off, said, it's Americana, boys. He says it's a country boy goes to town. It's a rags to riches story where somebody goes in and accomplishes something they're just not supposed to. And I think, being from, as he liked to call it, the Queen City of the Black Belt over in Selma and everything, I think he really cherished that role. And let's face it, a lot of his players came from those backgrounds and everything. And he fed off of that and used that to inspire all of us, I think, as well as anybody ever could have.
Listen, and we all, playing in that era, heard him make many memorable speeches, but I don't think, and Thomas, you knows what I'm fixing to say right here, there's never been a more memorable speech that he gave or one of our players on the 72 team. It was the opening ball game of the 72 season that we go to Jackson, Mississippi, and we're an underdog to Mississippi State to play them in the opening ball game. And Johnny Simmons makes one of the most memorable speeches. He asked Coach Jordan, could he talk? And then and everybody in the locker room is squalling and crying. And then Coach Jordan continues this of Johnny, what he was saying about that no Mississippi State team is supposed to be on the field with Auburn. I mean, and just went on, and everybody's getting all hyped up. And Coach Jordan, he looks up and he says, we going to beat the mighty Bulldogs in their backyard with 5 plays. He's holding up that left hand. We're going to beat them with 5 plays. That's all we going to run all night long is 5 plays. And everybody's getting all excited over, and I'm sitting over there in the corner and saying, golly, what are we fixing to get into? And so we all go out the door, and he's standing there at the door. I said, we're going to beat them with 5 plays. Is that what you're saying? He said, that's right. I said, well, we only got 8. What are we saving those other 3 for?
Ken, was it you tell me, or did I read it? Where did I see about the knife fight in Atlanta? With the fixed to play Georgia Tech. When you beat them first time up there, said he walked out on a diving board. The story was that I read it, I guess, somewhere. Called the team together. And when you beat Georgia Tech for the first time in Atlanta.
That was a 14-13 game.
No, it's 7-0.
No, it's 14-13. That was 50.
14,
That was
13,
55.
Thank you, Tommy.
Yeah. It was 1955. I was a freshman.
How tough.
And all we did was go over and steal rat caps and run for your life. That's what we had to do in the Georgia Tech game.
You wasn't there.
Not in 55, no.
But we were freshmen. We were freshmen. I went over to the game as a freshman. We broke the drought. They'd beaten us 14 straight years.
Yeah, I think it was 12, 13 games in a row that gone over to Atlanta, get beat. Seems like the officials over there.
Wait a minute, let's don't talk about officials.
In those days.
In those days.
But as I recall, won the ball game. I think it was 14 to 13. But a lot of you won't believe that during that era, that there's about 5 years in there that Georgia Tech was a bigger rival than Alabama. Absolutely a bigger rival. Because Auburn was beating Alabama, but not beating Georgia Tech. And they had this run under Dodd for like 12 in a row. I think it was 12 in a row, maybe more. But for 5 years, Georgia Tech was the biggest rival to Auburn.
Yeah, that's right, because we were beating Alabama 34-0, 40-0, and Tech was the deal. It was 14 straight years that they had beaten Auburn.
I was in high school then, but I can remember that Auburn was had those good teams, and they'd always lose to Tech. But until whenever it was 55. But the story that I got, that Coach Jordan came in, y'all normally went to a movie or something, and maybe you did go to a movie, and he gathered everybody up around the swimming pool, and he walked out on the diving board.
We used to ride up here on a train, go straight to the stadium when we played them. You remember that? We'd ride that train up there and they'd take it straight over to the stadium. We'd dress, play,
the game, right.
catch that train, head back to Auburn.
Well, it sounds like a hell of a story. You got to tell us what
I was hoping somebody in here was there, because it is a hell of a story, but I can't tell it. I don't know all the punchlines. One thing about Coach Jordan, though, is that about him, that to me, I really remember and appreciate more than him being a great football coach, is that the 9 years that I was coaching at Alabama, he never failed to look me up on the field out there and speak and ask me how Mom and Daddy was doing. He said, come here, boy. I said, how you doing? I said, fine, Coach. He said, how's your Mom and Daddy? Tell them I said hello. You know.
Well, football was not the only thing with him. And David, you may remember we beat Alabama 17-14 up there. Somebody blocked the punt. And
what year was that?
Run it in. I don't remember the year, but Alabama.
17-16.
17-16 was the score, and Alabama had us down 16-0 going into the game, and Coach sent Gardner Jett in to kick a field goal, which was about 35-40 line.
I think the Auburn fans even booed, didn't they?
Live, you have never heard such booing in your life coming out of the Auburn stand and everything. And I happened to be standing fairly close to Coach Jordan. He had a mannerism that if he didn't like something, he'd pull on his ear. Another mannerism, he'd do this. Yeah, so he turned around and he looked at me. He says, they don't think we're going to win, do they?
And I think that's a huge difference between Alabama fans during that era and Auburn fans during that era. And Coach Jordan did believe that there was more than winning. You know, He was very.
That's what I've been trying to say.
Auburn people. You know, he bred that in the Auburn people that it was very important to win, but it wasn't the most important thing.
You know, Gardner kicking that field goal, we come to the sideline, we got 4th down, 3 yards to go, and that's the only drive we've had all day. I think we've got a drive of 19 yards going or something like that. You know, we ain't got 80 yards total offense all day. I mean, they've just stymied us all day long. And Coach Durden asked Gardner, said, Gardner, do you think you can kick it from here? And it was, I believe it was 42 yards, if I remember right. And Gardner looked at Coach Durden and said, well, Coach, I ain't never kicked one that far before. And he said, Gardner, I'm going to ask you again, do you think you can kick it? And he said, yes, sir, I can. And, of course, Gardner kicks it straight through the uprights, the longest kick he made his whole career, you know. So.
While we're on the subject of field goal, one little retrospect in my life was that Brother Joe, my older brother Joe, played basketball for Auburn back in the 60s, and he was all SEC, and that was pretty much our Auburn ties for coming to Auburn. And Joe worked in the mobile home industry up in Marion County. He worked with, and of course the mobile home industry was up there was, you know, huge Alabama fans and contributors and supporters. And so he calls little brother Bob up and asked Bob and said, is Alabama going to beat you? And the line was 14 points on that game. And of course, Bob told him, no, I don't think so. And then he calls me up. And his boy said, these folks up here are harassing me, Bill. Said, you know, you got to, he said, is Alabama going to beat y'all 14 points? I said, no, it's Joe, there's no way in hell they're going to beat us 14 points. I said, bet the house on it. Of course, I was a little cocky about our defense then. We had a good year. So, believe it or not, you know, this game was going on, and they had a 16-0 going down in the 4th quarter. You know, I was looked up there, and it was 16-0. And I said, Joe is going to lose everything he's got. So I thought we was going to have a family feud there. So
now we know why you blocked those
when they kicked the field goal, it was 16-13, and we had beat the line. I said, right now, got it back. All we got to do is keep it from scoring.
So, before you let that go, talk about those two plays, because that had to be very unlikely for an interior lineman to get them both.
I don't want to lower myself as far as saying I was a lineman. I was a linebacker, okay? Not cut the lineman at all. I was a little bit more above, you know, I was behind them. Going into that game, our philosophy, I really can't talk about those two plays really without going back to the whole year and talking about the 72 team. And I know that, as the coach says, I don't want to take up the whole time as far as reminiscing about that. But the 72 team started off similar to what Coach Dye's 81 team did in the spring of 1971 when we lost Pat and Terry Beasley and Pat Sutherland after the 71 season. And the coach, you know, we were building. I mean, we lost a lot of key players, Dick Smaltz, Bob Brown, defense. I mean, we just so many key players were lost, and it was the same thing. That winter workout program, it was, Lord, we hadn't even talked about it yet. I know everybody's got stories about winter workout under the Coliseum in Jordan Hare, in the stadium there. But it was one of those gut checks to see who wanted to be there. That's all it was. We built our team around each other, believing in each other. Offense and defense, pretty much Terry Henley and Randy Walls and Jay Case and Mac Window and all those, pretty much they ran 5 plays. We knew what they're going to be. I mean, you know, but they didn't give the ball up. That whole year is the philosophy was that, you know, you put 10 points, you put 2 touchdowns on the scoreboard, and we're going to win this game. And, of course, there were 10 other great guys out there and on the defense other than me. Ken Burnage, Rick Neal, Benny Sibley, Bob Newton, Gaines Lanier, Danny Sansbury, Beck, Simmons, Langner. You know, we all had, but our philosophy on defense was each player take care of your home, you know, and then help out. And then that was pretty much what we did. We depended on ourselves to take care of our own positions, and then we helped out. But you want to go in and talk about that game?
Let's do it now.
We had we'd come into that game. We were 8-1. We were ranked in the top 10 in the nation. Alabama was number 2 in the nation. Had a 22-game winning streak coming into that. Coach Bryant and Alabama was looking towards another national championship year. That kind of galls me too, somebody having that cockiness, you know, thinking that national championships already. But we come into that game and we weren't intimidated by them. I think it was a bunch of guys similar to the same character that y'all talked about earlier that Coach Jordan looked for. It was just country boys that did not know what losing was. We went out to win. We went into a fight, and we were going to walk out winners. It didn't matter how. You know, we didn't, but we knew that we could win that ball game. The coaches started believing in us. After the first few games that we were supposed to lose that season, we ended up beating teams that had the longest winning streaks in the nation at the time. We were knocking them off like dominoes, just, you know, one by one. But
wasn't real pretty.
And we fought a lot that year. You're talking about getting into fights, you know. Langner started most of them, and it got so ridiculous that we just we walked off the field. If Langner was in a fight, we just kind of walked off the field and out there fending for himself.
I told him if they didn't leave me alone, y'all was going to beat the hell out of them.
And if we beat somebody, we were the underdogs for the next game. We were always the underdogs.
Well, we were picked to win one. We were only favored one time during the whole year. And that was Chattanooga, and we beat the living snot out of them 14-7. I mean, we were favored to win one ball game.
And that too. And I don't mean to knock the other teams, but that's probably one of the hardest fought games we played.
It was it was 7-7, and I remember we recovered a fumble, and right close to the end, 6-7 minutes to go in the game, and Coach Jordan got me in the arm, and he said, "Go in there and tell them if you don't score this time down that field." He said it was going to be hell to pay on Monday. And I went in there, and Thomas Day, the first play, we come out of there and run 29 yards for a touchdown.
I think the thing that was so interesting about it was that we weren't supposed to be any good. And Pat and them had left, and everybody was down on us and stuff. But we'd had such a hard spring, such a hard winter. And we would run plays where Coach Lorendo, we'd scrimmage for so long, and then we'd do goal line. And we'd get the ball in the 10, and maybe by fourth down, say we were on the 2 or the 3, and we'd come out to run the play. And Coach Lorendo would step in between the offensive and defense, and he would say, "Everybody point to the guy you're going to block." And we'd have to point to the guy. He said, "Now tell that, whatever, tell him you're going to block it." And these guys were like singers. They were all SEC and stuff. He's like, I'm going to block you, man, and stuff. And he said, "Well, tell him who's going to get the ball." He said, "Well, Henley's getting the ball." He said, "Tell him where it's going. It's going on right tackle." He said, "Tell him the snap count." He said, "It's going to be on 2. He said, "All right, now you better score." And so, sometimes we did, sometimes we did. But when we finally got to a game, they didn't know what we were going to run, although we ran the same thing over and over. The games were easy. The games were really easy, and we never felt like we were going to lose. Even when we lost to LSU 35-7, it's the only game we lost all year, we still felt like, and I still feel today, we should have won that ball game.
We had every opportunity in the world to win that game, and it just seemed like everything went wrong. We even walked out on the wrong end of the field to warm up on. I mean, that was the wrong thing.
They had that big tiger out there.
I never forget Joe
Tiger,
Boone.
they had a cattle frog and kept punching him with it.
Well, how about telling the details of the punt?
This is why we never let him talk. Y'all need to understand that.
You hear this? That's why we never let him.
This is why we never let Newton tell a story. He go on for days and never say a thing. You don't know what he said when he got through. Go ahead. Here we go.
Start over again. You're down in your position.
And so, as I said, it was really hard to talk about that game without following up really with all the other games that we played that year. But going into that game, there was a lot of Cal College talk and a lot of, what do you call all that, back and forth. David started some of it, in some of the articles. These reporters would be interviewing him, and then they would say something, and Henley comes in, we're going to kick the cow, this cow's going to kick something out of you, And so there was a lot of hype before the ball game. And it was not a televised game. That was the interesting part about it.
Are you sure he blocked it?
There wasn't but 6 minutes to go in the game when you blocked it. And it's taken more than that to him to get down in his position.
Y'all got to understand that these people here listening to this got to have a little background in it. We know.
If the way it's going now, we're going to be finished and you're not even going to be able to tell about it.
They'll save just enough time for Langer to run him back. We got because I know he did. We got to have a little time.
Played a hell of a game. Terry's here. He had, how many yards offense do you have, Terry, that time? I mean, you really ran it up on
We have to bring out statistics. We have to bring out. I can't we could have left statistics.
We're getting down to it.
I mean, because I carried it 34 times for 23 yards, ain't no big deal.
Hey, Ben, we see now the coaches had you talking to Bob.
And so, all right.
Bob is in a 4-point stand.
Going down to the latter 5 or 6 minutes of the ball game, and we got to the situation. We stopped them about on the 35 or something like that, 38-yard line, and they got up in a punting position, lineman, Alabama did, and I look over the sideline. I was calling defensive plays. Coach Davis gave me the sign for outside punt block, and the way it was drawn up, it was Langer and Mitchell that's supposed to block the punt because we were supposed to draw the lineman to block inside, and we had a situation with 2-on-3 on the corners. I lined up on the outside shoulder of the offensive tackle, and when the ball was snapped, I came inside of him, and nobody picked me up. And then as I was going through, it's like everything was slow motion. Greg Gant, which was a All-American punter for Alabama, they say he was a slow punter, maybe 3 steps. I'm not going to tell you that I was the fastest linebacker in the SEC because I was.
Because that'd be a lie.
They had an hourglass to tie my 40 in. So, but as I broke through, I saw the up back Billingsley take the rush from the other side, take on Burnage. And I knew I had it. I mean, when I was 5 yards from him, I knew I had it. I mean, he was starting his punting stride, and I lay out and block, took it off his foot. Never touched him. Saw the ball bounce. I was laying on his stomach, and there was Langer just standing over there waiting for something. I guess the ball bounced. And so he picks it up, and he runs on into the end zone. And, of course, having played more than our half of the ball game, but due to the offense not holding on the ball.
Take another shot.
Yeah, I was kind of tired. So I went on over the sideline, and everybody was jumping up, just like I said. Nobody knew who blocked it, what happened. It was such an intense rush with what looked like several people broke through. And, of course, they were scurrying on the sideline, getting to kick the extra point, and I wanted a drink of water and just sit down just for a minute. Anyhow, we just soon it was they kicked the extra point. The offense kicked off, and we had to go back in the ball game. Didn't have 5-10 minutes to rest there. They made one first down, and then they on the second series of downs, Mike Neal made a heck of a stop on Terry Davis on an option play. There's less than 2 minutes left in the ball game, 1.5 minutes. I looked over the sideline, calling the defense. He said outside punt block. So we did the same thing, and we lined up the same way. And I kind of shifted around, and Coach Davis had he'd given me a lot of credit for the ability to possibly try to draw that block down. And so he told me to get where I best feel that I could do that. So I basically did the same thing this time. ball was snapped, I broke through the line, and it looked like I didn't even think this, like, oh my gosh, here it was like, there it is, and I broke through, blocked the punt. Langner picks it up, and he runs it in, and I have never been more nervous in my life for Gardner Jett to kick the extra point. I wasn't even thinking about anything else other than that extra point at that time.
We go out there to kick the extra point at 16-16. We have about 80 yards of offense all day. The offense, we hadn't done anything. And so we line up to kick the extra point, and Jay Casey's all over Gardner Jett. Gardner, we've been busting our ass out here all day. You missed this extra point. I mean, he had his fingers. You look low, don't you miss this thing. Like, leave him alone, leave him alone, leave him alone. And he makes it, man.
But that's not the end of the story now, Lee. You had an addendum on the story.
Well, it was, like Bill said, and I promise I won't take as long as he did. It was about a minute and a half left in the game, and Alabama got the ball. We had to kick off to them again, and they got the ball, and they threw an interception, and David intercepted the pass. And when he did, there was 40 seconds left in the game. I mean, the game was over, and everybody's hugging, jumping around on the sidelines, and I was a sophomore, and Coach Jordan made me stand beside him anytime we had the ball because he constantly wanted to punt on third down in case it was more than 3rd and 5. We were going to punt, and let play defense because Henley couldn't run the ball very good. And so, I was standing by Coach Jordan with David Beverly, and we were standing there, and we go out there and down the ball 3 times, and Alabama still had their timeouts. They called timeout. And it was 4th down with about 10 seconds to go, and we had to punt. And so I'm standing there, and Coach Jordan said, punt the ball. And so we start running out on the field, and he hollers my name. And, I run back over there, and he grabs me around the neck, and he pulls my face, was just right there at his. And I can't use the colorful metaphor that he used to describe how I didn't need to screw this up. And so I ran back out there, and I swear, when I looked through my legs, David Beverly looked like a midget running off. And that's the scariest I've ever been in my whole life, I guess. And the crowd was going so crazy because of all that had happened, and I saw my life flash before my eyes right there, but we got it off anyway and won.
Let me tell you all about David Beverly, a little quick story about David Beverly. We go into this spring training, this winter workout January the 10th, okay? I mean, they tell us to be in the stadium. They got a 7-man sled. We walk out there, but a couple of days before this, Johnny Simmons and I had passed this guy going up the stairs in the dorm. I got a case of beer, and Johnny Simmons was smoking a cigarette. And Johnny said, who was that? I said, guess it's somebody's daddy. And so we out there, they come in the dining room a couple of days later and say, Coach Jordan said, be in the stadium. Said, don't worry about getting dressed, just be in the stadium. When we go in the dressing room, they say helmets and shoulder pads. I say, hey, the bowl game, we just got finished playing. We can't do this. And they said, so we go out on the field, and they got this 7-man sled down at the end down there. And we all down there pushing each other around, Thomas and all of us. And next thing we know, here comes that guy that Johnny Simmons and I had passed going up those stairs. He comes walking across that field, and he doesn't have a neck. I mean, his ears go right into his shoulders. And he walks over there, and we're all standing around there, all Beverly and Jett, all of us standing around there. And he said, my name is Pat Morris. I'm the new offensive line coach at Auburn University, and I've been hired by Coach Jordan to teach y'all to block better than Oklahoma. He said, so I want y'all to form 7. That's all he said. He said, so I want you to form 7 lines right here, everybody, to form 7. Well, when he did, I just kind of pushed my helmet up on my head and was standing there by David Beverly. David had those long blonde hair, and Gardner Jett, we just kind of stepped out of the way. He said, hey, long hair, where are you going? I said, well, Coach, I'm Terry Henley, I'm a runner. He said, listen, boy, I don't care who you are. He said, you and your 2 little faggot friends better go over and we go over there and get that 7-man line, and I'll never get Beverly getting down there in that 4-point stairs, and he looked over me, he said, I ain't a faggot, Terry.
On that happy note, it's time for our first break.
That's good, because I was determined to beat those Georgia boys and not go to the bathroom. But I ain't down to go.
What a great hour. It's incredible to hear how Pat Dye's coaching philosophy turned the Tigers into winners again. Hey, coming up next hour, we'll hear about some of the great rivalries of the Auburn Tigers.